Hi guys! So in this video, I want to show you a few adjectives that we learn and teach in class, which are actually considered rude. Number one of all, old. In many situations in my class, I've had students who turned up and described a friend or a classmate or someone they knew or that they had seen as being old. Their intention was really good. They were simply describing someone. And I know that in some languages, such as Brazilian Portuguese, for example, you can turn adjectives into diminutives. And that means it's kind of cute, it's nice, and it doesn't sound offensive to say someone is old. However, in English, it is not the same thing. If you say someone is old in English, especially if you say it to their face, you might cause offense. You might sound rude. What we do in English is we say someone is mature, or someone is a senior, or that person is older with ER. Or you can even use a negative sentence with a positive adjective and say that that person is not very young, which could still be offensive. So remember that if you're talking to someone and you want to refer to how old they are, do not use the word old because you might come across as rude. It is better to use a different term. The second one that's quite rude is one I actually thought about that when I was teaching a class, and my student said he had gone to a Prada shop and he asked for something cheaper because whatever it was he was buying was expensive. So the second adjective is cheap. Well, let's look at cheap and expensive. What's the problem with saying something is either cheap or expensive? Well, when we say things are cheap and expensive, we are judging not only the price of that product, we are also making a judgment on the quality. If you tell someone that the product that they're trying to sell to you is expensive, what you're actually saying to the person is the price that that person wants to charge for that product is too high for the benefit it will convey to you. You're basically saying you could offer me a better price because the quality is clearly not that high. The benefit I will get is clearly not that high. The same thing happens with the word cheap. When you ask for something cheaper, what you're telling the person is you don't mind getting something of a lower quality. All you care about is having a lower price. So if you're negotiating with someone, you never say things are expensive and cheap or that you want something cheaper. The alternatives you have are, if you want to say something is expensive and you're purchasing something, one of the things you can say is, I was looking to spend a little less. Or, this is a little over my budget. Notice that I include the word little. This leaves room for you to actually try and negotiate the cost depending on the situation. If you're looking for something that costs less, what you can say is, I was planning to spend a little less. Or, I was looking for something more budget friendly. Or, Do you have any options that are more cost competitive? That would be more appropriate in a business situation. You wouldn't do that if you were negotiating at a shop, for example, but you can say that. I'm going to add a link here with a series of other words that you can use to talk about something being cheap or expensive without sounding rude. Another very good word for cheap is affordable. When you say something is affordable, it means that it is easy to pay for that. To afford something means to have enough money to pay for it. So if you say you'd like something more affordable, what you're basically saying is, I would like something that fits the amount of money I want you to pay for that better than what you're offering me. Especially if you're negotiating a service, if you're negotiating intellectual work, or if there's craftsmanship involved in whatever it is you're buying. If you're negotiating with an artisan or the person who manually produced something, it is very rude to say something is cheap and expensive. Now, that doesn't mean if you're talking to a third party who's not involved in the negotiation, you won't be able to say things are expensive and cheap. Of course you can. But just remember, if you're talking directly to the person who's selling something to you, we don't say things are expensive and cheap. It's considered really rude. Another one, and this one is not always offensive, but some people don't like it. I myself am included in the list of people who don't like it. And the adjective is short. So if you're talking to a short person, it is very probable that that person has had that comment made about her or him for a long time. So what we do is, because the person might not feel very good about their height, you can say that person is not very tall. So when you can actually do this with any adjective that carries a negative connotation. You can swap it for a more positive adjective and then just put not very or not really. And it's a kind of way to create a euphemism and not use a word which could potentially offend people. Now, saying someone is short might not be that offensive, but just remember, not everyone is okay with being called short. Finally, the worst of them all, fat. I mean, if you can, just don't talk about people's weight because it's just rude in any situation. But if you have to describe someone's figure, there's no context in English where you will use the word fat and it will not sound rude. Actually, let me rephrase it. If you're talking to a third person who's not the actual person you are talking about, you may say it. I personally would find it rude, even if someone else said it to me. But we never say fat. There's never a positive connotation in calling people fat. Again, I know that in Portuguese you can turn it into a diminutive and you can just say the person is gordinho and it will sound kind of cute. It doesn't in English. It's offensive. What people tend to say is plus size, or a more technical word which would be overweight, but we never say someone is fat. These are very simple adjectives. Students usually are taught to use these adjectives at beginner levels, and they don't necessarily convey the same impression that you would like. That means if you're learning these adjectives or if you're teaching your students these adjectives, it is very important that you show them in what context they should be used and also what alternatives you have for situations where you could be considered impolite.